Hey guys, another video for the Crime and Emergency Services in Japan playlist. We made a video recently talking about the justice system in Japan, and this week there was a story in the mainstream press that illustrated a couple of points that were made on that previous video. So it seems that, now again this is all second hand, we're getting this from news reports, so you know, it's second hand. It seems that a 62-year-old man in Kyushu was in a convenience store, and the way that lots of the convenience stores work here is you buy a cup, you tell them what you want, you say I want drip coffee, or I want latte, or I want, you know, hot green tea, or whatever it is that you wanted to get. Usually it's coffee from the machines. A lot of the stores have canned coffee and bottled coffee and bottled green tea and canned green tea and hot and cold and those options, but there is a coffee machine that dispenses drip coffee or latte or whatever you want. So usually you go to the counter and say I want a latte, or I want a drip coffee, or I want this, that or that, and you pay and they give you the cup, and then you go to the machine and you put in the coffee and you put the lid on and take the sugar and milk and off you go. And it seems that this 62-year-old man in Kyushu went to the counter and ordered a drip coffee and was given the cup, paid his 100 yen for the drip coffee, and got his cup and went over to the machine and put the cup down and pushed the latte button. And it seems that the latte was 150 yen. So he paid 100 yen for the drip coffee, but he took a 150 yen latte, right? And the story said that the store manager, was in plain clothes. It said, I don't know. Again, this is all second hand, right, from reports. So it's probably third, fourth hand by the time we read it. But it said the manager was just in his own clothes, in his plain clothes, and he saw this and called the police, right? So this is illustrating a few things from that previous video, isn't it? In that previous video, we're talking about how there's very low tolerance and very little sympathy for anybody in Japan who breaks any rules, right? So this would be a pretty good example of that. So the managers called the police, and the police have come, and at first the man said that it was a mistake, right? Now a lawyer would probably say, stick to that story, you know, it was a mistake. But the manager said that he'd seen the guy do it a number of times previously, and then the guy admitted that to the police. He said that he'd done it on purpose, and that he'd done it a number of times previously, right? So he was arrested. So obviously a lot of other countries, you know, it is petty theft, right? So in a lot of other countries you might get a misdemeanor sort of ticket written for him for $20 or $30 or $50 or something for a petty, you know, misdemeanor crime like that. Or simple crime would be called in some countries. Different countries have different laws, of course. Or the owner might have said, just don't do it again, and he might have been given a warning, right? In a lot of other countries. Or in a lot of other cases, the manager wouldn't have actually called the police at all. The manager would have said, hey, I saw you do that, don't do it again, and that would have been the end of it, wouldn't it? But it's not surprising. It really isn't surprising. In Japan, it's just what it's like here. We've talked about lots of examples of this. Pedantic, and no tolerance at all for people who break the rules, and no sympathy at all for people who break the rules. And it's interesting though, some rules, you know, we also showed you a lot of videos of people going through red traffic lights and roads where everybody is speeding, and that's really, really common in Japan. And that's sort of, there are rules that everyone breaks, and because everyone breaks them, it's sort of, you know, it's sort of acceptable. And of course the police will still give you a ticket for going through a red light, and they'll still give you a ticket for speeding, but you know, it's sort of like if everyone's doing it sort of thing. Whereas any sort of theft, you know, any sort of theft at all in Japan is considered to be the lowest of the low, and any sort of theft or damage or any sort of anything involving other people's property is treated really, really seriously. There's lots of stories of kids making that sort of mistake when they're young, and getting caught, and then being dealt with by the police, and having it go on their criminal record and have it go on their school record, and then that limits what school they can go to next. So if they're in elementary school, what junior high school they can go to, what high school they can go to, what university they can go to. And so basically that one mistake early on in life can ruin their whole lives. And that's it's sort of like the way it's seen here is that it's that their weakness of character is being shown up. So the penalty for that, if it ruins their life, well, it's because they had a weak character, right? So pretty, again, example of that ruthlessness as far as people, breaking the rules, some rules. So isn't that interesting? So yeah, the crime was, and it said, that's right, it said they're investigating. So he was arrested apparently. It didn't say if he was bonded. We'd have to assume he wasn't held in custody. You would hope he was bonded and he was allowed to go home. You'd hope he wasn't in custody. It didn't say he was in custody. It didn't say he was bonded either, but we'd have to assume he was. He was released. So it said he was arrested, didn't say he was charged. It said the investigation is ongoing as they try to work out how much he actually had stolen. So in other words, they're trying to work out how many times he'd done that, and then multiply it out by 50 yen, which is about 50 cents, and work out exactly how big a crime it was before they decide whether to prosecute him or what they're going to do with him. So, isn't it amazing? It's amazing that he was arrested for it, and it was amazing that it was in the news, isn't it? I mean, it's in the news because it's a sort of a, well, how about that sort of thing. And it was in the English-speaking media as well. So, whether it was actually reported in the Japanese-speaking media, we didn't see it. We didn't see it on the news in Japanese, and we didn't see it in the newspaper in Japanese. So they probably aren't interested. But yeah, it was in the English-speaking media. So there it was. I mean, in a country with such low crime rates like this, the crime we do see reported, not normally that petty, of course, but we do see fairly petty crime reported, because there's not a lot of crime going on. So we do see a fair bit. Incidentally, before we finish this video, there was an interesting story in the press this week too, about how an incredible amount of money, it was like 39 billion yen. 39 billion yen, which would be about $300 million that had been lost in Tokyo in cash at different times, right? In 2018, a total of $300 million that had been lost by different people had been handed in to the police. So isn't that amazing? I mean, an amazing amount of money. $300 million that had been lost by people during 2018 in Tokyo had been handed in to the police and returned to the original owner. Isn't that amazing? So a few things that show up in that is, first of all, the honesty of Japanese people is obvious. Cash, right? Keep in mind it's cash they're talking about. So amazingly honest, isn't it, to hand in the cash? And the other thing is the amount of cash that gets handled in Japan. And we've talked about this on previous videos when we've talked about don't bother bringing a credit card to Japan and things like that, is that it's still a huge cash society, and cash gets used by everybody all the time, and amazingly for big things too. We've talked about when buying land or houses in Japan, a lot of cash gets piled up on the table, and you pay that real estate guy gets $10,000, and that real estate person gets $10,000, and that person gets $5,000, and the owner gets handed $40,000 deposit, and this person gets this and this person gets that, and piles of cash. You can sit there for hours while all the paperwork is done and everybody does the counting of the cash, and because everyone has to count it, has to be counted twice by everybody. That side has to count it twice and this side has to count it twice, every pile, so there's a lot of counting of cash, and so cash is just everywhere in Japan. There was a lot of that going on after the Tohoku disaster. For years afterwards, they kept finding safes all around the place that had washed up after the tsunami, and they were finding safes and opening them up and finding them full of cash, and they belonged to different people around the place, and a lot of time was spent with that too, returning these safes to the people that owned them. So yeah, cash is huge in Japan. So cash and honesty are very common in Japan, evidently. So anyway, there it was, the interesting arrested for a $1.50 cup of coffee story. And he paid the $1. It was only the 50 that he was ripping him off for. So anyway, his lawyer would be going, oh, you know, because his first answer was obviously what the lawyer would want him to say, right? And we talked about that on the other video. That was actually the other point, was we talked about that on the other videos. The reason for one of the main reasons for the 99% conviction rate in Japan, you know, 99% of people are charged with something are convicted. And one of the reasons for that is the confession thing. So, you know, they're just saying, yeah, I did it. So that's what he did. And his lawyer would be going, oh, you know, if you'd said it was a mistake, it would have been a really hard thing for anybody to prove otherwise, wouldn't it? Oh, I just thought that button was, I didn't understand. I thought that button, you know, if he just said that, it'd be hard to imagine they would have arrested him, really. But he admitted it, and admitted having done it lots of times previously, which, you know, the police then are sort of obliged to do something, aren't they? So anyway, there it was. More videos coming soon.